Hello, everyone. You're listening to Clock In with Stephanie D, where we discuss pressing workplace issues and tackle these issues with fresh perspectives. I am your host, Stephanie Droulard. Thank you for clocking in with me today. So, the first impression series is in progress. We reviewed part one, the digital impression. Now we're going to explore part two, the interview. Okay, so interviews can trigger different emotions, and at times we experience many of them throughout the interview. Yes, they can be a nerve wracking ordeal, but it doesn't have to be. In order to be calm, cool, and collected during an interview, it helps to be confident, knowledgeable, and ready. Let's get into it. When I think of an interview, I think of all of the parts that make up a whole. I want to break this down into the anatomy of an interview. These are all of the parts that make up the whole. Here we go. Let's start with the homework. This is what you're doing before the interview even takes place. This is where you understand your potential employer. Do they offer products, services, or both? Do they have multiple locations in the US? Do they have an international presence? Who are their competitors? Who are their employees? Have you noticed any recent press releases? Are they expanding, going through a merger or acquisition? Are there new executive members? Maybe they just became a publicly traded company. You have to understand who they are, what they do, how they do it, where they do it, and then figure out how you factor into all of that. Because essentially, an interview is all about answering the question, why you? Why should they choose you? That's your homework. All right, next part, your presentation. Arrive early, poised, polished, and professional, at least 10 to 15 minutes early. If you have a 9 a.m. interview, consider that you have an 8:45 a.m. interview. Factor in travel time, whether you're driving or using public transportation, if you're walking, if you're using a scooter, whatever the case may be. Then, if you are driving, factor in how far you have to walk from your car to the building. Because remember, if you have a 9 a.m. interview and you're in the parking lot at 9 a.m., you're not on time. You're late. Okay. Arrive early, poised, polished, and professional. Now, for virtual interviews, you still have to arrive early. You should be the first person logging into that virtual room. When the interviewers are logging in, they should already see you in there, waiting in the waiting room, okay? Now, dress appropriately from head to toe. I know they can't see you from the waist down. Dress from head to toe. Dress the part. Okay, that's the second part. Number 3, your interaction. Oftentimes, you're being assessed from the moment you step onto the location. Be professional, be courteous, be respectful to anyone you meet, even if it's in the lobby, elevator, the waiting room, the restroom, in the parking lot if you drove there. And some of you might think, "Oh, that's too much work. That's too much work. I'll just switch on my professional switch once I get inside." Let me tell you a quick story. Okay, there was a time when I was serving on an interview panel. I'm driving in and I couldn't find exactly where to get into this parking lot. When I finally found what I thought was the main entrance, I drove onto the parking lot, and as I'm approaching, I see a spot and I'm going to go in there. Then I see another car coming towards my left, almost in a position where they could T-bone me. But they were driving so fast up that lane, they cut in front of me and entered right into that spot that I was just about to go into. So I sat there in my car in disbelief and I waited to see who the driver was. The person comes out, they look at me, I look at them, and I sort of whisper, well, not whisper, but mouth, "Seriously?" They waved their hand at me, they waved me off, and they kept walking. Okay, fine. I find another spot, I go in. I go to the reception desk and I say, "Hi, I'm Stephanie Drillard. I'm here to interview on the panel for the XYZ position." The receptionist tells me, "Okay, great. The candidate's already here." I think you all know where this is going, right? So I turn around and I say, "Hello there. I'm Stephanie Drillard. I'll be serving on your interview panel. Nice to meet you. We'll be right with you." Okay. This person completely froze. It was a man. His jaw dropped. And you can tell he was embarrassed because he's the one who cut me off in the parking lot. So the point is, you just never know who you're going to encounter. Be professional, be courteous, and respectful to everyone. All right, next factor, taking notes. But first, you're going to ask before the interview begins and all that, ask if it's all right for you to take notes. Most people will be fine with it. In the slight chance that they're not fine with it, then don't take notes. You'll just have to retain as much information as you can. But for the most part, they'll be okay with it. Now, remember, you're not taking long notes. This isn't a class. You're taking short, abbreviated notes that you can refer to if needed. You don't want to spend your time with your head down writing. The interviewers do not want to look at the top of your head. They want to look into your eyes. They want to be able to assess who you are. They want to be able to imagine how you fit into the team. So short, abbreviated notes. Make sure they're concise and that it's details that you probably didn't know before, right? Because remember, you've already done your homework, but they may share more details, such as the number of team members. They may share specifically who the team services, who their clients are, where their territories or markets are, how many lines of business they may have, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you're jotting down things you didn't already know from your research and the homework that you've done prior to the interview. Next, listen. Listen, 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 listen. I can't stress this enough. Pay attention to what's being said. The interviewer or the panel may share details about the company history, the culture, the goals. They may even share specifically what they're looking for. Sometimes they do that too. Be sure to listen. The more you understand, the better you'll be able to respond and ask questions. Next, your mannerisms. Be mindful of your mannerisms. For example, eye contact. Be sure to look everyone in the eye. If there are 2 or more people in that room with you, look at each person. If someone asks you a question, don't focus on that person only. Span the room, look around at everyone, 1 to 2 seconds per person, and then eventually come back to the person that asked you the question. Okay? Also, there are other physical mannerisms, such as your body language, folding your arms, speaking with your hands, overly speaking with your hands, rather, shaking your legs incessantly, tapping a pen on the table repeatedly, using fillers such as like, you know what I mean, you know. Here's a great way to reduce, if not eliminate, using fillers. Practicing before the interview. Try to go through a mock interview. If you have someone that can ask questions and you can practice answering questions or just practice your speech, that will help big time. If you don't have someone, use a mirror or record yourself. Use your phone and record yourself so that way you can do the playback and pinpoint what areas need to be improved, right? If you're speaking too fast, speaking too slow, too low, too high, if you're using your hands way too much, these are things that we're not really mindful of in the moment. But if we take the time to review this prior, we can perform much better in the interview. Okay, next, questions. This is important. Have thoughtful, relevant questions ready. In some cases, you'll think of new or better questions to ask based on the information that was shared during the interview. Now, you're already going to come in with, 3 to 5 questions set and ready to go, but you may actually think of new questions, which is great. Now, please stay away from the usual questions. What's the goal for this position in the first 90 days? What's the company culture? Chances are they already went over that or you already know the answer to that question. Questions like that, right? They're fine. If you want to ask them, they're fine, but don't let that be the end all be all. Be sure to throw something in there that proves you've done your homework. You want to differentiate yourself from the competition. Chances are you're not the only person interviewing for this position. Ask meaningful questions, things you want to know. For example, explain the team dynamics. Does everyone work well together? Is everyone pretty much siloed? Now, with that, if there is internal conflict within the team, chances are they're not going to just come out and say that. So pay attention to what they do say and try to deduce what's not being said. Another example, are there growth plans for this team or department? Here's another one. If you research their competitor, you can ask, I heard that XYZ company recently launched a new service that reduces customer wait time by 40%. How is your company planning to keep up? Here's another one. What are the challenges that your team is currently facing and would need the person in this role to take on right away? You want to capture the best possible idea of what this role really looks like. Now, aside from the salary, the commute, the benefits, things like that, remember there is a day to day that you have to endure in order to receive that salary and those benefits. Ask thoughtful questions. What does the day to day really look like? Next, the close. This is where you think like a salesperson. What can I say to convince them that their search is over? Or at least make it very hard for them to make a decision. This may be what they remember most, so make it count. It's your last chance to show them that you're the missing puzzle piece. This is where you're able to explain, what value do I bring? What skill set do I have that most people don't have? What problem can I solve? These are the types of questions that you want to be able to convey in your close. Lastly, the post interview. Send a thank you note or email within 24 hours. Thank them for their time. Reiterate your interest. Reference an important fact that came up during the interview. Share your contact info. Now, with that, please monitor your email and your phone. Okay? Check your email, check your voice messages, check your text messages. I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to a candidate to extend an offer or to call them back for a second interview, and I haven't heard back from them in days or even weeks. Employers will likely move on because your competitor is on their phone. They are on top of their phone, they're on top of their email, and they're responding quicker than you. The thank you email or note should not be an essay, doesn't have to be long, but a direct and thoughtful appreciation for their time. Now, if you don't hear anything, follow up. This depends on the person, it depends on you. Some people wait 1 week, some wait 2 weeks. If you don't hear anything, follow up to ensure they remember you're still interested. Now, here is a very critical part. In the event you don't get the job, still be graceful and professional in your response. Okay? Chances are you're going to receive an email. In some cases, you might get a call if let's say you sat in on 2-3 interviews or so, you had to come back 2 or 3 different times. They may actually pick up the phone to call you to let you know you weren't selected, but they appreciate your time and interest. Okay. Once you have the names of the interviewers, follow them on LinkedIn. Once you see the messages they post, like them, comment on them, repost them, just be a positive contributor to the conversation. If this is a company that you really want to work for, then your time will come if it's meant for you. There are times when you and your competitor are pretty much aligned, but your competitor stood out by a hair. However, somehow it just ends up being the wrong decision. When this happens, employers may reach out to you. You're the close number 2. They can only choose one. There was only one vacancy. You were the close number 2. If their number 1 happens to fall through, they may actually reach out to you to see if you're still interested or available. Remember, what's meant for you will be yours. So again, be graceful and professional even if you didn't get the job. I understand you're thinking I was perfect, my questions were perfect, I brought my work samples, I was courteous, I was professional, everything that I just mentioned in this podcast episode, but somehow you still didn't get it. Remember, you have competitors. You don't know what they brought to the table. And sometimes your competitor might have just clicked better with the team. You really don't know sometimes at the end of the day. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It could mean, despite what you feel about that position, that wasn't the one for you, or at least not at that time. Again, they might choose someone else, and later on it falls through, and then they call you. So, how you handle rejection can make all the difference as well. Keep that in mind. All right, so that wraps up part 2, the interview. I'll let you know when part 3, the first day, becomes available. Thank you for listening. If you feel I left anything out or have questions, feel free to reach out to me via Instagram at ClockInWithSteph. Leave a comment on the YouTube post for this episode, or send me an email at clockinwithsteph@gmail.com. So really quickly, just to go over all of the parts that make up a whole of an interview, I see this as the anatomy of an interview. Remember, the homework, your presentation, your interaction, taking notes, listening, your mannerisms, your questions, your close, and the post interview. All right. Thank you so much, guys. And remember, be kind, be fair, and bring value.